All right, welcome back, everyone, to The Writer's Lens. This is Josh JCL Felto, and I have a very special guest today on my podcast for actually a return interview. Um, she is a wife, she is a mother, she is a creator. Kay Smith, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. I'm happy to be back talking with you about my favorite things.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I'll get into a quick little ditty here about how I know Kay. Kay and I go way back to the days of college. We were just talking about it actually right before
That's right.
I put this on and we hit the record button. But we were reminiscing about a class we had together called, called Death and Dying. And I think we were both were just going, why on earth did we take this class?
I
Like,
think we had to take so many like religious
mhm.
electives, and I had done world religion, and then junior year, I don't know what made me do it, but death and dying. And we were just talking about how we took a field trip to one of our local funeral homes, and just what a great time that was.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was, in fact, it was so awesome that I tried not to remember it. You were bringing it up, and I just went, yeah, I think I repressed that memory.
I'm
So
pretty sure you were there, Falco. I feel like you drove in my car. It was a bizarre class.
it was.
When you're 20 years old, you're really not thinking about death and dying. It
No,
was
no, definitely not. But what you might be thinking about is your future, or at least you're supposed to
That's
be.
true.
You're supposed to be thinking about your future in college. And I did want to share this because I didn't get to say it last time when we first connected for this interview. Was you always seem to be ahead of the curve with technology and just artsy things. And I remember that Mac computer that you had that had like the
Yeah.
one button. And it was, to me, it was like such a foreign concept because everybody had those gigantic tower computers
Yep.
from back in the day, and that gigantic screen you had to lug up three flights of stairs.
Yep.
That for whatever reason weighed like a ton, and you were just like, I got my screen in this thing that just with the single button. I just was like, how do you even
Yeah,
use
my
that
mouse.
thing?
Uh-huh. I know my husband's computer was like a mini TV. It was so big. He had like the 18-inch laptop screen. Yeah,
That
I went to college with a Mac, and that was pretty at the time, like pretty cutting edge and a
mhm.
risky move. But I went into college knowing that I was pursuing art and graphic arts, and that was recommended by so many different teachers and professors in the industry. It had Photoshop and InDesign, and it ran all the programs I needed for my major. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I was ahead of the curve, I guess.
You totally were ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And on that note, the fact that you were ahead of the curve, you jumped straight into a marketing firm
Yes.
right out of college. And I don't want to give away too much of your story because I want you to kind of share that and bring it to
Yeah.
why I wanted to interview you. Other than it was kind of easy, maybe to twist your arm a bit, being
Never.
a friend of mine from past life. Uh, but yeah, so tell me a little bit about your story, about where you
Yeah.
started out in school. Obviously, we met there, but just what got you into doing marketing and kind of this art background that you have.
Yeah, so growing up, like I always knew I loved to draw and paint. I loved to create stories. I had a great imagination, but the school I went to, I loved it, but it didn't really have a strong art curriculum. I didn't have a designated art teacher. There wasn't, a really strong program. So I never really had someone breathing creative words into me or inspiring me, telling me that I was creative. So I never really thought to pursue anything in the arts field.
Mhm.
It wasn't until high school, the high school art room was so cool, and I just was always intimidated by it, but I was drawn to it. It was like this mysterious place where all the cool artsy kids hung out. And there was always like really strange but cool paintings in the window. And I was kind of one of those people that just had their nose pressed up against a window looking in and admiring everything.
Huh.
But it wasn't until senior year of high school that I had to take an elective, and I decided to do a graphic design class at high school. And it was the first time that my creative spark was lit. And my teacher, Mrs. Pleben, just, she was so supportive and
Hmm.
just said the right words that boosted my confidence. She really gave me creative confidence. And it was the first time that I thought, man, I'm kind of good at this. I had a knack for it, and I
Hmm.
just really enjoyed it. And my mom, she would give her right arm to support my dreams. Immediately started doing all this research about different schools, different graphic programs. So I went to Mount Union, and it was a hybrid program. It was called Media Computing, and it was a mix of studio art, design, graphic work on the computer. And it was kind of like a hodgepodge degree, but it gave me exposure to all different sides of the graphic world, marketing, art, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got an internship in college at Kuno, and then when I graduated, that's where I got my first job. And so I had been there for the last 13 years.
Wow.
It was, yeah, it was my home. It was where I kind of grew up all through my 20s,
Hmm.
my early 30s. And it was just the best place to work. I have to admit that. Like, it was so creative and so much fun. We were always on the cutting edge. We started off as traditional marketing with a lot of print stuff, and we were on the front of the inbound movement with, social media, content creation,
Hmm.
all the different platforms. They're doing some really amazing stuff with video content now. And so it was a hard decision to leave.
Hmm.
But over the past maybe 2 years or so, I just kept feeling this tug, like I was ready for my next move,
Mm-hmm.
career wise. I've been having kids over the last 8 years, but career wise, I was just feeling really unsettled, and I just really had to tune in to what was going on in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the more and more I explored and went deeper, I just knew I was being drawn into art education. And I had started an art group out of my home with all my kids, all my friends' kids. And, sometimes I would have 20, 25 kids showing up at my house.
Wow.
Or at our local church. We would use a space there in one of the rooms. And I was just like, man, this is really fun. And this is kind of something. Like, it was turning into something, but I also have my job and my kids. And so it just gave me exposure to art education, to process-based art, and I just fell in love. Yeah, and so it was a really hard decision to leave Kuno, but I knew it was what was next for me.
That's awesome. Now there's a couple of things too, like in your story that I think are really interesting. First of all, we're kind of on the early, like, millennial kind of
Yeah,
age group, and to just be at one, I think, company for 13 years is a real accomplishment for, like, our age group. Uh,
I think so too. When I look around at close friends who have either hopped around or unsure what they want to do, or every 5 years or so they're switching.
mhm.
But I never could picture myself doing anything else until the last year or two, I want to say.
Hmm. And that's interesting because I think, I've often thought about this a lot because I've had a couple different vocations since I've got out of
Yeah.
college, and you kind of saying that the environment there was very inviting as far as for a creative, being
Hmm.
able to really kind of dig into different things and not being so confined. And I think a lot of people think about office work and they go, oh man, it's like being with a ball and chain, or I'm shackled to my desk and there's no outlet at all or anything like that. But your experience would kind of like be the opposite of that in many
Yeah.
ways.
In that realm, yes, absolutely. Like, yeah, you had to get stuff done. You had to
Hmm.
produce results, but a lot of it is a lot of brainstorming, coming up with new ideas, fresh content ideas,
Hmm.
layouts, working with the design team, giving art direction. And so it did leave a lot of room to express yourself creatively. And man, we worked with some of the best designers in the industry. Some of the web stuff they were putting out, video stuff, it was just it blew my mind, and it always inspired me. So I just learned a lot. I soaked everything up. Like, every meeting I was just watching them, soaking everything up.
Huh.
um, but yeah, it wasn't like punch in, punch out, sit in a cubicle, input data all day. It was a great environment to be in.
Hmm. And you were talking about the transition going from being in that environment to now being a teacher in art
Yeah.
and whatnot. Now, that transition had to have been just really difficult, and you kind of glossed over a little bit. So we're going to unpack that a bit. I
Yeah.
mean, just this transition, because I know that, I mean, you're married, you have 4 kids now, and having a stable job and having that kind of security is not an easy thing for someone to just say, okay,
Right.
well, I think I'm done with this, and I'm just going to move on to the next thing now.
Yeah, it wasn't something I took lightly, and I gave myself some time over the summer off just to like regroup, refocus, get prepared. I read, I've been reading a lot of books, blogs,
Mm,
podcasts, and it was a huge learning curve. I'll have to admit, jumping into a classroom right away. The art part of it, I'm very confident with. It was more of, working with administration and all the paperwork involved and all the different softwares you use in the classroom,
mm,
getting used to my smart board and just all of the things that you don't really think about. I just had this kind of idealized vision of what art teaching will be. But, and then the art group that I was running might have, 10, 15 kids. And then all of a sudden you're teaching 28 kids
mm,
and they're all different skill levels, some with extra needs that need attention, some that move much faster. And then they're done halfway through and they're asking what they can be doing next. And you're just like, I don't have a plan. And so it's been a lot of learning on the fly. The first few weeks, I think I made a lot of like, yeah, on the fly decisions and
mm.
learning from my mistakes. Like, I need to have something ready for them if they're done halfway through class and the rest of the class is still chugging along. So yeah, it's been a huge learning curve, but it's been really great. Like I made the right move and I love where I'm at. I'm so passionate about it. I love
Mm.
the diversity of the school, of the backgrounds of the kids, of the families. So it was definitely the right move. It really had a learning curve, going from a professional marketing setting
Mm.
to a skid or a school with. I teach first grade all the way through eighth grade. So
Mm.
yeah,
That's a really varied group of kids. I
it
mean, as far
is.
as that's a lot of different age groups. But since you do have many little sprouts of your own, it can kind of be a
Yeah.
little bit similar in a way that, yes, I have an older child. How old is Lila now?
Lila's 7. I almost said 8. She's 7 in second grade. So sometimes I talk to the first graders. I'm like, what would a mom say? Like I'm in that zone because I have a kindergartner and a second grader. It's like, okay, I got to bring it down. I'm not talking to eighth graders anymore. They will work a lot slower.
Hmm. Yeah.
I always take halfway through the class. I take 30-second, I call it a 30-second wiggle break. And we do Simon Says, and then we kind of dance and get the wiggles out because I have to remember their attention spans are so itty bitty
Hmm.
at that age.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are. I mean,
Yeah.
my 3-year-old, it doesn't help that he's a boy, but he's also just all over the place.
Oh, yeah,
And it
totally.
just, when they're sitting doing a craft, those are kind of those little precious moments where you feel like I can actually kind of, pour into this kid a little bit with something while
Right.
their attention is on this thing that they're doing. So, um,
Absolutely. I've noticed that with my kids. If they're kind of crazy, if I just bring out some paint and paper,
mhm.
like just that alone, it'll center them. They'll focus. The amount of information you can get out of a kid when you're working on an art project together, I just kind of let them lead and
Hmm,
talk. And you're totally right. Like it's a great way to connect.
cool. Do you think that in that case that every one of us is a little bit creative at heart? I think we all
Oh,
have a
yeah.
little bit of creativity. Okay, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had this little presentation when I started school this year with my fifth and eighth graders that
Mhm.
I said, I don't want to hear the word I can't or I cannot. Like that is banned from Mrs. Smith's art room. I
Mm,
said, each of us can create something from nothing. I can give you a lump of clay and you can mold it with your hands. And that's my favorite example because you don't even need tools. Your hands can do the work for you. And you can make something out of that, whether it's a
mm,
pinch pad, a bird, a little box, anything. You can make something out of nothing. And we're the only species on this planet that has an imagination
mm,
and, being created in the image of God. And He is literally the ultimate creator. He
mhm,
has breathed everything into existence and he doesn't duplicate anything. He creates from nothing.
mm,
And I think that we have that quality in us, that essence in us to be creative. And I think the expression of our soul comes out when we create stuff. So yes, I hear it a lot with adults like I'm not creative. I wish I was as creative as you and that makes me sad because I feel like somewhere along the line, someone told them that they weren't
Mm.
creative, or they started to believe that they're creative. Because I look at my 8 year old, I said that again, my 7 year old and my 5 year old, and they can dream up anything. They don't have any limits on their creativity. They never feel embarrassed by it or limited by it. They're just working away. And I'm like, man, where along the line do teenagers, or maybe it's not cool, or
Hmm.
grown-ups, they've been told at some point that it wasn't good, or just saying the wrong thing at the wrong time to a kid can really squash their creative confidence. So
That's really good. I mean, I just was you had mentioned earlier you had that art teacher years ago
yeah.
who really kind of endorsed your interest in art at that particular time, and that was like the critical moment almost for you.
Yeah, it's
To,
like something just flipped in my head, like, oh man, maybe I could really do this.
hmm hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was in third grade at the time when I was writing stories. I was trying to duplicate comic books or something at the time, and
Yeah.
I was writing out stories, and I had a third grade teacher. Was it Mrs. Hovis? I think was her name, and that was when I also learned what plagiarism was.
Oh gosh.
when I was actually writing out the line for line from dinosaur books and comics
Oh
and
my
stuff,
gosh.
and yeah, Mrs. Hovis was like, "Wow, this is really good, Josh. Where are you getting these ideas?" And I think I showed her the book, and she went, "Yeah, this is you're copying everything word for word, Josh. This is what is known as plagiarism. You're not allowed to do that." So
Well,
I had to reassess my creative path with writing, but still learning. It's a work in progress.
right?
So, um, so on that note, though, too, just thinking about, what it takes to cultivate creativity in us, do you believe that we all have sort of a calling on our lives? Is it something that we're doing throughout our lifetime, or is it like a one shot, like I figured it out and now I'm just going to run with it?
Yeah, so this is a conversation or a topic that I have been thinking a lot lately about, just because with a career switch, I spent the last year really exploring, like, what am I good at? I do believe each of us have specific spiritual gifts that the Spirit
Mm-hmm.
has given us. We have something really powerful in us that when used for God's glory, man, it could just explode. And so I do believe we each have specific gifts given to us, and we're to honor God with them. But I think in the capacity that we use them, that's where free will and the freedom to choose, how we use those gifts
Mm-hmm.
is up to us. And so when I look at myself, I just spent a lot the last year really thinking about, like, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? And it always came back to art, and it came back to creativity and creative expression. And I was trying to figure out how could I use that for God's glory, for in the kingdom. And not every person is going to have a ministry-based job.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a garbage collector or a taxi driver, or you sell flowers, it doesn't matter. You can still honor God with those gifts by doing that, shining His love in your space.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to think of how I could contribute my own gifts. And being an art teacher in a Christian school, that was my first, I don't even know how to say it, my first goal.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I can spread the love of Jesus, the gospel, to my students. And that's a great attribute of working in a Christian school.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about Bible verses and God's creation, that type of stuff. And then the conversation about each of us being created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to be able to just have an open platform like that. But then more specifically, just even on a church level, I don't know, the conversation, I know you have a book that you've read. I've read, like, The Artisan Soul, or Pursuing Christ, Creating Art. I think that's the name of it, by Gary Molander.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks a lot about, like, creating that environment when you walk into a church. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are all sensory beings. God created us for sensory intake. What are we smelling? What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What can we touch or taste? How is that experience, that sensory experience, helping us usher into the presence of God? And what colors, I mean, not that it's that specific, but, like, what colors are you using? Just what are people seeing when they walk in? And I think about, like, the command Jesus or God had for building the ark to
Yeah.
Noah,
Hmm.
building the tabernacle, the tent with Moses, even the
Hmm.
temple with Solomon. Like he was very specific
Hmm.
about measurements, materials, colors. And I think we have the freedom for church now to kind of have expression, but I'm always thinking like, is this pleasing to God? Does this honor God? Or are we doing this because we like pallet walls and we like, shabby chic country farmhouse type
Yep.
Joanna Gaines? Or are we doing this to honor God and to bring people into the presence of God?
Hmm. That's all really good. I mean, the book that you had kind of referenced that I had
Yeah.
read was Called to Create by Jordan
Yeah, that's
Raynor.
it. It's on
Yeah.
my list.
Yeah, and he has some really good stuff in there. I mean, he interviews a lot of different just business owners and creative folks about, how do you use your gifts for the kingdom? How do
Yeah.
you cultivate them and then figure out how to, utilize them somewhere in the market space or
Yeah.
even with just a small group of people. And I think one of the best takeaways I had from that was just basically saying that you don't have to be a pastor. Like that's not the end goal of your life.
Right.
If you're a Christian, you shouldn't think that my ultimate goal is to be a pastor and stand up in front of people and teach on Sundays. Like I
That is
can
my
teach in a
gift.
school. Yeah, like I can teach art in a school, and that's going to
Yeah.
be part of the ministry. And I think that that's absolutely just right on. So yeah. But his, I mean, I think also part of the kind of his end note was that we do have a calling. We do have callings on
Yeah.
our life, and that's kind of an ongoing process. And I mean, do you personally feel like you've settled into where you think this is where you're going to be for a while, or is this
I
something
do.
that you don't think about necessarily, or is it just kind of an ongoing
Yeah,
process?
I kind of look at my life like in seasons.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing season was great out of college. It's where I
Mm-hmm.
really learned the professional world. And then I could just feel it over the last 18 months. Like I would, like something was tugging. I was ready for the next step. I do think I'm going to settle in and teach art for, God willing, for a while. I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like I'm kind of in my zone, my place right now. My kids are all going to be in school in the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
So this elementary school stage, it's going to last for a while. My youngest is only 1, so we'll be there for a good 14 years. So, yeah, so I do plan on teaching art for a while, but I can just foresee a lot of different directions. Like I would love big picture to start like a creative ministry where we're doing outreach programs with art education or art therapy. We're in a very Lorraine County has some pockets of, some Section 8 housing and just different
Mm-hmm.
areas that are low income that could really use
Mm-hmm.
God's love, that could really use the
Mm-hmm.
arts as a way to express themselves. Maybe they have, some family things that they're working through, and whether it's a community art show or just regular art programs in the community. I would love to start something like that, but I don't want to wish away where I'm at right now. Like I
Yeah.
really am enjoying the season that I'm in. So I love to dream big and plan big, but also I don't want to take away from small because there's a lot of beauty in the small.
There really is. I think that's really wise too, because I think from our last time we had talked, you were we were also kind of touching a little bit on your photography business that you were
Yeah, that's
doing
right.
as well on top
Yeah.
of all this. And I remember you were just saying, "Man, this got to a point where I'm doing this real late at night. I'm
Yeah.
spending a ton of time on it. I Is this even worth doing it anymore?" I mean, and I feel like there's kind of a unique pressure on I think just people today about having maybe like this passion project in
Yeah.
addition to whatever it is that they're also doing. And I guess how have you navigated that? Because I know you're not doing that as much right now,
I'm
but
not.
how like what were some breaking points maybe, or like what would
Yeah.
you give as far as advice is when it comes to those kinds of things?
So I'm kind of like the queen of projects. Like I think you are too, Josh. I
Yeah.
just love having stuff to work on. And
Hmm.
so I started doing photography 2010, so almost 8 years ago.
Hmm.
And it was never intentional, but just slowly over the years, I accumulated a client base and I just got busier and busier.
Hmm.
Um, And then in 2016, I started doing like weddings and just a ton of fall shoots.
Mm.
And that fall, I mean, I remember I had 2 or 3 shoots a weekend in September and October for the whole, like 8 weeks straight.
Wow.
I reached Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I was just flat out burnt out.
Mm.
And then I found out I was pregnant with our fourth, and I got so sick, just morning sick with him for weeks and weeks.
Mm.
And that entire winter, I just hibernated. I literally couldn't move off the couch. I had no creative desire. I didn't make anything. I didn't shoot anything. I did nothing for a good 4 months.
Wow.
And I told my husband, like, feeling burnt out and having morning sick, when you don't feel your best, I had zero creative inspiration.
Hmm.
So that taking that step back made me realize, like, man, I don't actually miss photography. Like, I hadn't touched a camera in 6 months by the time summer had came, and I didn't miss it.
Wow.
I wasn't looking to book anything, and so I knew I had to do like a heart check, like what's really going on here. And I think it all stemmed from, like, when my photography professor had said, if you really love photography, you're never going to try and make a career out of it because you'll start to hate it. And that's what's happening to me, where it wasn't my career. I never intended it to be my career, but it took away weekends from my families. I was up till, 11:30 midnight editing, and then I'd be so cranky the next day when I'm home with my kids. They did not get the best of me. They got the leftovers of me. And so it was just this vicious cycle of never having enough time, being away from family. And my husband, he works, he travels for work. And so the weekends are so precious to us. Yeah. And yeah, it just, I mean, I love doing photography, and I love doing it for close family and friends and here and there. But yeah, that was just a season of burnout. And so it's kind of one of those things where I'm not happy, I'm not healthy. What is causing this, and what can I cut out? I had to cut that out, downsize it to really leave room for what I wanted to do. I had to leave room for the best Jess. And that was really just taking up a lot of my capacity.
Wow. That's really good stuff, Kay. I mean, as far as you were saying, you were not happy, you're not healthy, what's going on here? And I think a lot of people can get tunnel vision when they're in the midst of, hey, it's my passion project. This is something I really like. This is something that interests me. Right. I need to keep going. Right.
And the part is like, people, and my husband, I mean, he was so encouraging, and he just, man, you're so good at this. Look at this. You have all these clients and you're so busy. This is just fantastic. And so then it made me feel bad for not being happy. Like, why am I not happy? You're right. Like, this is successful. I'm halfway decent at it. But yeah, it made it even harder to take a step back when you know that, like, it's actually going somewhere, but it's not what you want. So I just had to work up the courage to be like, okay, we have to stop this. Even if I am good at it, that doesn't mean I have to make it a career.
Right, right. It's really kind of like a reshuffling of your priorities in a way.
Yes.
You know, just recognizing, like, what are my actual priorities for what I'm responsible for, or who am I responsible for as well, and you being a mom of 4, you got a lot of people that you're responsible for.
And I just look at it now, you can be good at something and enjoy it without trying to make money off of it. Like, I love photography and I'm good at it, but I don't have to make it a career. I don't have to make it a business. I can just do it for the love of doing it. And that's where I'm at right now.
That's good. That's really good. So what advice would you give then to somebody that is like, I kind of want to do something on the side, and I'd like to maybe start a bit of a passion project like photography, or maybe just, I don't know if it's painting or something, or there's a whole myriad of things out there I feel like the people can do that they feel like, oh, maybe this could be something more than, me just kind of playing around in the basement or something like that.
Yeah, I think for me, it always starts off with, what am I drawn to? Like, what do I get excited about? And am I talented at that? Like, I always get so excited to go to the Cleveland Art Museum. I always love taking pottery classes. And so it's kind of one of those things, like, that always has drawn me in. And so I think if anyone's looking for a side project, I would just start with a local class. If you're starting to realize, like, hey, I really enjoy cooking, find a cooking class. There's a ton in the Cleveland area. or you want to start crocheting or knitting, or it doesn't even have to be anything creative, but just start with a class and see if it's really what you want to commit to. Um, and then I would just network and start small, Etsy, Facebook, and just kind of build your business locally. And I think that's the best way to start, is with like a local tribe.
You're using a lot of buzzwords that I'm familiar with, like the tribe and you know, do some do some local. You know, as a writer myself, I hear that term used quite a bit, because that is actually what the goal would be. You know, is accumulating a bit of a community that you could have around what you're doing, so you can show people actually what you're actually working on.
I think you can find a community around pretty much any passion, hobby, extracurricular. There's someone else out there that enjoys it as much as you do. And so there's probably a support group, not support group, but like a meetup, a book club, a class going on. There's more than likely something already established in your area based upon what you enjoy.
Good. So probably last question then for you is, you know, I kind of ask this about anybody that comes on here, is the process of just trying to balance being a mom, being a wife, and just all these kinds of things and everything else that you got going on. Is there like a silver bullet at all as far as in dealing with that, or?
I think family always comes first. And so I always frame it around that, like you said, like it's about the priority shuffling. What my priority is always family, church, God, Jesus, my relationship, and then fitting in the classes that you're interested in, working on a creative project. And also having, my husband is just so super helpful. I could not do that without him, because when I'm away, someone has to be with the kids and vice versa. So, just having that extra support, someone on your side, and just knowing that you don't have to do it all.
Yes.
You don't have to be super mom. You don't have to have it all together all the time. I think that's just a big misconception in this day and age. You know, you can fall into the comparison trap on social media. That woman has it together. Her house is Joanna Gaines, and she's always at the gym. And look at those crackpot dinners. How does she get that done? And man, my kids don't play with Play-Doh. They're watching TV. Not my kids. But you know what I mean. It's easy to just look at everyone's highlight reel and feel like you're not enough or doing enough. And I just say, cut it out. Really filter what you're seeing on social media to, if it leaves you feeling like junk afterwards, it needs to go.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to do it all.
That's
prioritize.
Good. No, that's really good. I think, you know, I've talked about it with a few other folks. I think just recently I did an interview with Brian Del Turco, and he was talking about how having a confidant, somebody that supports you in what you're doing creatively, is like so imperative, because there's a lot, I guess, of gusto behind the idea of, look at me, I can do it all by myself. And you know, maybe there's a bit of a pride thing there too for anyone that says that, you know, I can do this on my own. But ultimately we do need someone in our corner. You know, we do need some kind of support system. So
I think Pastor Eugene Cho had just recently said, behind every successful person is an entire team of people that believed in them, breathed life in them, supported them, helped them out, gave them resources. Like the self-made man is just a big illusion. And so, there is a little bit of pride in that. And I always have to be careful of that, like, pride issue of like, look at me, look at how great I am, look at all these things I'm doing. When really it's like, oh my God, thank God my kids are dressed and alive at the end of the day. You know?
I know. I totally relate to that, Kate, completely.
Right.
And I've got half as many as you, and I still feel that way. So
man, parenting is hard, but it's so good.
Yeah, no, definitely. It gives you a lot of creative juice too. I know that.
Oh yeah, it really does. Kids, especially being in art, coming down to their level. It gives me so much inspiration.
Mhm.
They are so free to express themselves. They're really great creators.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I'll bring this in for a landing here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just thank you again, Kay, for
Not
being
a problem.
on the Writer's Lens. Here's the opportunity then for a plug for you, as far as if anyone wants to find you on social media or kind of join up in the tribe or whatever you got
Yeah.
going on. Where would be the best place to find you?
So my website is catherinesmithstudio.com.
Hmm.
Yeah, .com. And then I'm mostly on Instagram. That's where I'm working, putting all my art projects and stuff around the art room. So it's Instagram.com/K, like the letter,
Hmm.
.smith.art.
Hmm.
You can
And Kay,
follow from there.
and I will say that your Instagram is full of really interesting stuff. I mean,
We try and keep it interesting in the art room.
yeah, I would say so. I mean, the most recent one I think I saw was you with the wings.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that's such a great project.
that was really cool. That was
Every student and staff got a feather to decorate. We celebrated our 75th anniversary at our school and church. And so we made these huge, Kelsey Montague,
mhm.
she's the artist. She's a street artist in Nashville, makes these big angel wings on the side of buildings. And so we just got inspired by that and went
Mhm.
with it.
That's awesome.
They
That's
were
awesome.
beautiful.
Definitely check it out if you are interested in those sorts of things. So,
Thanks,
so
Josh.
Kate Smith, thank you again so much for doing this the second time.
Ah, not a problem. We could do this every night. I'd
I,
have something new to say.
I know. I mean, I know. I feel like there was a whole bunch of other topics that we hit on this
Yeah,
particular
it was good.
conversation, and it can just continue to unpack it. So awesome, good stuff. So thanks again, Kay, and thanks
Thanks for
everyone
having
else who's
me. It's
listening
been
in.
fun.
I'll be back again soon. Thanks.
Sounds good.